ever thought about going on a reality dating show like The Bachelor? Hi, I'm Rose. Nice to meet you. And these are so you don't forget me. Or Love is Blind. Hello? 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 If you have, you're in the right place. I'm a psychologist who follows these shows, and I've oftentimes wondered why some people struggle more with their mental health versus others who say it was the best decision of their life. Join me today as I welcome Dr. Isabelle Morley, the founder of UCAN. In this video, two psychologists giving you tips about what you can do to stay safe on reality dating shows. I'm calling it Know Before You Go.
I have met Dr. Isabelle Morley from the UCAN Foundation because we both are here to support cast members and to do it in the best possible way. So I'd love to turn it over to you, Dr. Isabelle, to just explain what it is that you've learned through this process.
So happy to be here with you talking about this. So, Dr. Isabelle Morley, I'm also a clinical psychologist. I'm a couples therapist, and I'm on the board of the UCAN Foundation, which stands for the Unscripted Cast Advocacy Network Foundation, which is a mouthful, but it represents reality TV cast members. And my work there is all about finding mental health support for people who go on these shows, because it can actually be a really challenging experience in ways that people don't anticipate. And then the UCAN Foundation does a lot of other work as well, getting legal support and advocating for industry-wide change.
Fantastic. Tell us how someone would use UCAN when they would use your services, because it's legal and therapy.
Yes, so we can get people legal support, we can get them mental health support, but really anyone at any stage of the reality TV experience can come to UCAN. We have resources for people who are considering being on a show and are interviewing for one, or just curious about being on one. We support people who are right about to film or have just finished filming. We support people whose shows have been out for 20 years and need support or want to take action. So really, wherever people are in the process, come find us, talk to us, and we will help you no matter what.
So, Dr. Isabelle, I'll call you Isabelle, if that's okay. They just contact you at UCAN, and I'll put the link below about how to reach you.
Yes, yeah, you can just submit contact to our website. You can DM any of us on the board, whatever works for people. Find us on Instagram, whatever they want.
Fantastic. And so if you had to just say a little bit more about the UCAN mission. So I've heard things about making sure that people get paid, or making sure that they have representation, or they have therapy after the fact. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we have found is that since its inception, reality television has not been a regulated industry, and they have not provided typical supports that we would expect from essentially an employer to provide to their employees. They found ways to skirt around having to provide more than minimum wage or pay residuals. They don't have to provide mental health support. They don't even have to really provide a certain amount of sleep or breaks or enough food or water to contestants. So people, as a result, have been exploited in this industry. And it's not every single show and it's not every single person, but because it's unregulated, a lot of bad has happened, and people are just now being able to sort of speak up about it and advocate for change. And that's where the UCAN Foundation comes from.
So what do you see if this were the case? Would it be more that they were like a union and that was regulated and you can only work so many hours? Like how would that ideally happen then?
I think there's two paths to this. One is, yes, like the union path, where reality TV cast and crew can be a part of a union, and then there's regulations that go along with that. Or they stay ununionized, but there's other legal demands of this industry. So people are still required to be paid a certain amount, or they're required to be allowed to sleep a certain number of hours, even if there wasn't a union enforcing it. And I think either path would be okay, but they would both require a lot of change in the industry as it is now.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a minute, because a lot of people have questioned these people go on these shows looking for love. Why would
Mhm.
they expect to get paid?
And I can understand that argument. I mean,
Right?
if
They
you are
get
very
thousands of followers, they get to be on TV. Why pay them?
well, I think the first argument is that they are employees. They get W-2s
Okay.
at the end of this. So technically, they should be getting paid. And that's kind of what's promised. The second thing is these shows are making millions, hundreds of millions. So it feels unfair to not
$90
compare.
million on season 1 of Love is Blind.
See, that's a lot of money, and not a lot of it is going to the people who are creating, who are the foundation of this show and of all of this money.
Now,
The other,
let me also ask, because I know you got involved more with UCAN with Love is Blind. But for
Mhm.
instance, I can just talk about The Bachelor, which I've been following for 20 years. They never get paid. The lead gets paid about $100,000. And I've heard, but before, I think they got paid a little amount, but they literally had to spend money on their own clothes, their own wardrobe, which could be thousands of dollars. Previous cast members have said that. But if I'm on The Bachelor and I'm one of the women, I don't get paid at all.
yeah. So you're going on hoping that you're one of the top choices at
Yeah.
the end and that you'll get a big enough social media following that you can make money afterwards by using that platform. But the vast majority of people are not stars. The vast majority you don't even know the names of. They're nameless, they're cut from the show entirely. So people go in wanting to be the star and getting a lot out of it, and many people get nothing.
So, in your estimation, though, it would be more fair if there was just a set amount that each person got, or they were there based upon how long they were being filmed or something. Would that like, right? Because if I'm on there till the very end, right, I should get paid more versus if I'm somebody who gets cut week 1 or 2 or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think a minimal expectation would be minimum wage for
Okay.
people. I
Okay.
think that is a place to start and grow from. And then if you happen to be somebody who is recurring on many seasons or who is a main character or who's a lead character, yes, you should be able to get paid more for that too.
Or with the writer's strike, right? I mean, people have come forward and said we should get residuals, right? If I was, if this show is going to be on, it's going to be versus ABC is kind of a little bit different than having it on Netflix where it could have a longer life, right? So I don't disagree with that. But if you had to say the number of even legal cases or the complaints that people have had, has it been, what would you say the main complaints are? Is it about pay? Is it about the story? What would you say the biggest issues are?
Great question, Diane, because I think a lot of attention is on the pay right now because Bethany Frankel came forward about residuals, and that's been a real thing for her, which I think makes a lot of sense. The lawsuits and what we hear people complain about is not about the money. People are kind of okay with getting paid nothing to be on these shows. It's about the contracts and the NDAs and what happens that they're not allowed to speak about afterwards. So people are upset about the conditions that they worked in. They're upset about what they endured, even in the dating experiences. And mainly they're upset that they can't talk about it truthfully, that they can't go against the edit once all is said and done. So a lot of lawsuits about breaking NDAs.
Absolutely. And Isabel, I'm aware of even some current lawsuits that are happening. And for me, I just looking at it, when we think about even situations of harassment, like in the workplace harassment, right? As therapists, we find it's always about power, right? Because there's someone who has more power, your employer, your professor, or someone who's acting upon someone who has less. And in this case, we're identifying with the cast members who have less power, because if I have a negative story, they're going to try to squash it. And then they're going to say they have, they're going to hit you with $1 million lawsuit. And who are you as a little person, right? As an individual to go up against that, regardless of what I signed up for.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's very scary for people to come forward when they know they could get hit with $1 million per breach of contract, right? Not just in total, but every time you say something that they think you shouldn't have. That's, for some contracts, $1 million is really hard for people to go up against. So I think there's been a great job silencing people in this industry, but we're in the day and age of not caring about NDAs and finally challenging them. So I think that's what's finally happening.
And the breach in the NDA is that I can't say anything about how it was produced, or it's more about the specific relationship that I felt like maybe I was partnered with someone who was not a safe person, or like, what do you think the biggest breaches are?
Well, these NDAs are complicated and they are all encompassing. So there's two main areas we see shows going after people. One is if you do an interview that they didn't say was okay, because they
Ah,
have the right to decide who you talk to and when and what show.
okay.
So there's people who go against that, and that a bachelor was taken to court for that. The other NDA breach is saying things that you shouldn't, talking about how the show was produced, what happened behind the scenes, going against the edit. They can get you for that too.
Okay. Two different things. Got it. Got it. Okay. So, and thinking about all these shows, thinking about Married at First Sight, thinking about Love Island, about Bachelor, about F-Boy Island. I mean, there's so many different reality shows out there. The Bachelor. Um, let's just say people are watching this because they're thinking about going on a reality show. Okay. What could we, having seen what could go wrong and all the cases with UCAN, what advice would you give someone if they were going on a show, what to do, what not to do?
I have so much advice for people who want to go on these shows.
Okay.
Because I mean, I'm not against reality TV, and like UCAN isn't against it either. Let it live on, let it flourish, but let it change for the better. So the first thing I would tell people is make sure you are completely mentally stable, that you have a therapist, that you've done your work, right? That you've figured out your own attachment stuff if it's a dating show, that you are ready, you're in a good psychological place to put yourself in what will be a psychologically challenging situation, first and foremost. I'm
Okay.
sure you agree.
Yeah, get a therapist, know yourself,
Yes.
know what your issues are, 100%. Be as stable as you can be, given that you're single, right? And there's some elements, right? There's some longing. I have to respect the fact that people have also probably been on dating apps. They've done a ton of different things and they feel like nowadays, I mean, I know because I work with single people, right? Dating is so frustrating. You can't even get somebody on the app to respond to you, that going on a show where everybody wants to be married, right? Or at
Mhm.
least engaged. The idea is that I can bypass a lot of this and somebody else has done all the screening for me, right?
Yes.
Like I get that. That would be the lure. So try to be as stable as possible. I 100% agree. Have your own therapist.
Mhm.
Know as much about yourself. What's going to make me anxious? Like if I know my attachment style, or
Mhm.
I'm a little bit more on the avoidance side. I have a hard time opening up. Like even say like what would be my personal goal? Like I'm here to learn how to filter myself more, or I'm here learning how to open up more. Like if I had some sense of my own expectation about what I'm working on.
Yes, and the more that you can own that and say it and have people know that about you, you're doing the work in the context of your relationship. You don't have to not have an anxious attachment style to go on one of these shows. You have to be aware of it and be working on it and bring people in to know you in that way to help you work on it. Absolutely agree.
And talking about anxious, because I have data, I have a quiz, a love style quiz, and the most people in the population are anxiously attached. But those are the people who go on the shows because it's like my love life is frustrating and they make
Mhm.
for good TV, right? There's usually more drama, more crying, more people getting invested in the process quicker.
Yes, absolutely. But that links back to what you said before, which is I think you also can't assume that the other people you're on the show with have been as thoroughly vetted and are in as good a place as you are. So the hope is that everybody goes on this show because they're ready, they're excited, they're going to be authentic. You cannot assume that's the case though, because some people will not have done the work and are there for the drama, and some people are just cloud chasers. You can't totally filter them out in the process.
And I even have a t-shirt, a sweatshirt from the Bachelorettes that says here for the right reasons, because that's a big thing in Bachelor Nation. Like, are you here for the right reasons? There've been like songs even done about this. So one, have a therapist, be as stable as you can emotionally. Two, don't assume that everybody else is there for that reason. So like you're saying, be more vigilant, right? Like
Yeah.
go in, but also recognize that not everybody's you. Because sometimes I do that. I do the golden rule. I assume everyone is the same as me. There could be people who aren't that.
Yes, and don't go as far as paranoia, right? And not
Right,
trusting anyone, because
right.
that won't do you any good either. But just be aware that not everybody is there for the same reasons, for the right reasons, and you have to just be a little bit cautious, especially if you're going to be making a commitment like getting married. And I think that it's always okay to not make a legal commitment at the end of a show because you just don't know somebody well enough.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate though, because you and I have talked about this before. I mean, if there were therapists involved, but we would probably be cautioning people against those outcomes. Having said that, the show, right? The producers want to produce an outcome. They've got to like push you towards that. And there's a quickness, right? I mean, like you got to get engaged in 8 weeks or get married in 3 months, a month, right? Um, what do you do then if like you meet your person, but you also feel this pressure to kind of move it along?
I think it's such a tough position because there's internal pressure. You finally found someone that you love and want to be with. Of course, you want to be with that person and make the commitment. There's the external pressure of the producers and the show and the cameras wanting you to get to that outcome. And this is back to going in, knowing yourself and knowing your boundaries. If you really think you're okay with getting married at the end of a show, then great. You can take that step and knowing that you could always get divorced if you need to. But it's also okay to say to yourself, yes, I'm going into a show that wants me to get married at the end. And I will not do that. I will be at the altar as I'm contractually obligated to be, but I will wait until I feel certain of what I actually want to do. And that just takes a lot of self-trust of knowing your limits, your boundaries, your goals, and sticking to it no matter what happens.
Mhm. And I think this brings me to maybe number three, what I would think as advice, Isabelle, see if you agree with me. I really think it's about kind of managing your own story and then managing your story as a couple. And the people that I've seen who have done this successfully, right? Like they know what they will share or what they won't share because the producers are trying to get you to share very personal stories, which can build as viewers an interest in your story, but that can be used against you if you haven't worked through that story, right? Your story can kind of take on a life of its own. It can be Frankenbit, right? Which is they take pieces and make it sound into something else. It's like, but they don't put words in your mouth. This is the thing. People think that it's like highly scripted. I'm like, these shows are not scripted. They are edited though.
Yes, they're very carefully edited. Yes, they're not scripted, but producers are very good at their jobs. They go in with pre-established story arcs for a lot of these shows. So they know when they cast you, you're actually going to be this storyline. And they know what questions to ask and what situations to put you in to get that story arc out of you. But yes, if you go in knowing this is how I'm going to present myself, and if I'm in a relationship, this is how I'm going to present that relationship, you've got a better chance of not being really misconstrued. Honestly, I think there would be a role for working with someone specifically around that piece of it, not therapy, but more like media training of here's what I'm willing to say, here's what I won't say, here's how to answer questions when I'm being interviewed in a confessional to make sure it can't be totally taken out of context so that people are as prepared as possible to have control over their story.
And I have seen in particular, it was I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. Is it season 3 or season 4 where we saw the most couples on Love is Blind? Tiffany and Brett and
Sure.
Kwame and Chelsea. That was 4, right?
Mhm.
I thought those couples did a brilliant job um, managing all of that.
Yeah,
You
they
see that?
did.
Like I
Yes.
thought, and first we know that like the greatest of all time, right, are Cameron and Lauren. And
Mhm.
they were season 1, and it's like nobody else is going to touch them. But that was the first show. And then we know after that it gets watered down over time, right? That people go on for different reasons to have a big following because we see what's happened, right? But I
Mhm.
think back to if you can manage your story and if you as a couple can say what we will or won't share, that we're going to be united because everyone is going to come at you.
Mhm.
Everyone is going to, when you get out of the pods, what I've heard, and on all these shows, the filming isn't the worst part. Like the filming happens and people join and meet and become friends because you're all in this crazy situation together, right? There's like bonding that happens, not
Mhm.
trauma bonding, I say to people, but
Social bonding. Mhm.
there's bonding, and then it's later when you don't know the edit that you're going to get and when the story comes out and then you get your phone back and now you've got everybody saying like girl red flags, but because they could have built up the storyline about your partner in some way that you had no idea, and then it's
Yes.
like now what do you do with all of that?
Yes. So I think there's two great pieces to what you just said. The first is even if you go on these shows for the right reasons, you
Yes.
have to be really strategic on how you approach your time there. You do have to manage what you say and manage your relationship. And I think that we don't like to talk about that, but during filming, for example, they'll bring couples together and say, talk about this issue, talk about this really challenging issue about money or sex or whatever. Or they'll say, recreate that fight that you had because we didn't get it on film. So do it again now. And you've got to have a conversation off camera with your partner saying, here's how we're going to handle that, right? So it doesn't tear you apart and turn into something that you don't intend it to. The other piece of that is yes, the world floods in. It's so much information. It's no time to process it. You're getting so many opinions and so many pressures, and it's overwhelming. And people are not prepared for that. And we're actually, hopefully, within the next 3 months, releasing a guide from UCAN about what people need to know and how to be prepared for every stage of the reality TV process. And a big piece of it is what you just said, like managing emotion regulation and boundaries with people and filtering information once you have access to the world again, because it's so much, it's overwhelming.
So, Isabel, I've had this thought and I shared it with you. We had another conversation about getting a social media manager.
I love this idea, Diane. I think that they should do this. This is your best idea.
And I really think if it's me, and I follow all these people, and people even who are out already for a long time, like Caitlin Bristow, she was the Bachelorette long ago, and she still is talking about sometimes you get some really hateful comments. People have had like death threats, like horrible. The public gets so invested. It's like how we used to think of like soap opera stars. Like we forget these are real people, not actors, right? But they just people think that because you're public, we can say anything to you, right? That because your love story happened, that I have access to you and I deserve to like know your relationship status. Oh, she's not wearing a ring. Oh my gosh, right? But if I had a social media manager who I paid to go through my comments and my DMs, then
Mhm.
I wouldn't have to hear that one comment of that person who like planted a little seed and said, how about so and so, blah, 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 right?
Yes. Yeah. I think this is the best idea. And I think it was you who had said the show could pay for 6 to 12 months. You find your own person and they manage your social media for that beginning onslaught of feedback so that you don't have to. I think another complementary thing shows could do would be to find interns, take college interns and have them respond to all of the comments, all of the public comments on their cast members' profiles, saying something along the lines of, I'm representing The Bachelor. This is a show. It's been edited. It's supposed to be a reality show for entertainment. You're not supposed to condemn the people who are on it. You
Yeah.
don't really know them or their story. Like, please be kind in your feedback and have the show take responsibility for commenting and responding to people who are aggressive, who are threatening, who are cruel to people.
I love that because even YouTube now has more, again, filters about protecting people, and Instagram, it says like be kind. But again, I've seen these shows where people will just, and I also think personally that we need to actually hold those people who are making comments more accountable. There was a woman, an influencer, who actually started doing that. There was a subreddit against her, and she actually filed counter suits on these people.
Wow, I love that idea. I
Because she's
mean,
like,
that
you would have no idea. Like someone was a therapist commenting hurtful things, and then people like lose business, right? But
that's
I'm not. I'm just recommending that we have to keep that in mind. And I do think that if I have to be on social media because I'm promoting the show, right? But then how is someone protecting me? I think yes, the producer should pay for that. But if not, and I want to protect my own mental health, if there could be a way to get an intern or somebody else, I would 100% agree with that.
Yeah. And I think the people watching this might be thinking, how bad is it? Just ignore those mean comments. Don't take it personally. You know it's not true. But until you've lived it and had people DMing you and commenting on everything you post saying, you're a terrible person. You deserved everything that you got. You know, you're crazy. No one should be with you. People say really mean stuff. Until you experience that personally, you cannot fathom how destructive it is. So for everyone watching this who wants to go on a show, you have to prepare yourself. The feedback, the negative feedback um, is really powerfully awful.
I agree with you. I think again, then we could talk about smart ways if you go on how to make the best of it. But I 100% agree that people, there's no filter, and I think it's really awful. Um, Wonderful. So get a therapist. Don't assume. Manage your own story. Get a social media manager. Is there any other advice? Somebody's going to go on a show. Um, how could they make the most of it or protect themselves?
I'm not a lawyer, but I would say have a lawyer read your contract.
Yeah.
You're going to have very little negotiating power because they've got 100 other people waiting who would love to be on the show if you say no or ask to make changes they don't agree to. But at the very least, you can be prepared. You can know what you are signing up for and you can arm yourself with that knowledge going into it. I would also say consult with a lawyer about what your rights are while you're filming and getting some language around how to assert those rights if you feel like they're being denied.
And what kind of lawyer is this specifically? A contract lawyer? What type of law?
I would say contract or entertainment law. And the UCAN Foundation has some lawyers that we work with and typically refer people to who are familiar with that industry and who can be a good resource. But I would have someone look it over because I mean I know nothing about the law and contracts. When I saw that contract for Love Is Blind, I would have signed it having no idea what I was actually signing away.
Okay. And here's another vote of protection for people. So post show, you're going to have more fame than you, right? Suddenly now you're a person, right? You're going to get verified, etc. We just had a situation on The Bachelor with a previous bachelor. Somebody had come forward, said she was pregnant with his twins. It was a whole story. But my whole thing is get an NDA for yourself then.
Mm.
So now, how do you protect your information for the public? I mean, there's one thing about the people on the show, but now you go out in the world and famous people and actors and actresses, they have PR people helping them, right? Before I even go for drinks with someone, I hand them an NDA because I am a person of interest and I have to recognize that other people could target me
Mm-hmm.
to say anything, post pictures with me. Like you have to be very strategic and smart post show appearance in all your relationships with other people.
Yes, which I think celebrities have a slow ramp up towards, and they have more and more help and PR people who navigate that for them. But a lot of people on reality TV shows are suddenly famous with no ramp up and have no idea. So that's such good advice, is to be aware that you have to really consider your interactions and stories that could come out if you're not
100%.
careful.
So let's talk about how a therapist could be helpful too. So you and I both know, we both agree that I think having been on the show, you should have access to a therapist, whether you use them or not. But
Mhm.
just to talk about like it's sort of then they talk about the immersion sort of back into your real world after the show because you've taken off a chunk of time where now you have to keep this secret, whatever the story is, right? But how do you think a therapist could be helpful to that person?
I think having at least one other person in the world that you can be totally honest with would do a lot of good for people. Secret keeping is not good for people. Having your life partitioned, having to lie to people you care about, it's incredibly difficult. And so having at least one person who is HIPAA protected be there for you would be great.
What does HIPAA mean? Just in case people don't know.
HIPAA is your privacy of your medical records. So you can say anything to your therapist. There's a few exceptions, but it's protected information. So you can disclose things to your therapist that even if your NDA says you can't to the public, you can tell them.
Now, would it be helpful if the therapist followed these shows or not necessary? I mean,
What do you think? I don't know. I'm of two minds.
well, I think personally, myself, I mean, I could be helpful just because I know the back end and I know the editing and I know, who might be getting a bad edit. As we've said, like, you can make Mother Teresa look like a villain and you can make a villain look like Mother Teresa with good editing. Or I don't want to say good, I could just say with editing, right?
Mhm.
Um, but if you had a therapist, to your point, you have one other person, and I think this is in my mind, and we'll get to it, like how to make a good show. There's so much you could learn about yourself too, right?
Yes.
And I think even like after the show is out, after filming is out, if you went over some of that with your therapist and the therapist actually caught the clips and watched it, like, wouldn't that be super helpful information about
Yes.
you to like notice areas in dating where you broke down or you disclosed too much or right? Like I think that would be so meaningful. But to your first point, having one other person, I think what I see the mistakes that people make in social media is everybody feels like I've got to share my side of the story, right? Because otherwise you could say, well, why don't you just stay quiet about your couple or whatever? And they feel like my partner has disclosed something. They've said we've broken up or whatever. And I haven't had chance to make my own statement, right? Now I feel that people want to know and I have to versus like just being quiet. If you had another therapist as your confidant, as your person, it's almost like I'm telling you so I don't have to tell everyone.
Yes, you have the safe space where you can do any of the talking you need to. And I think a big piece of it too is then it delays your response. You have the chance to talk to somebody and decide intentionally how you want to handle situations or what story you want to tell, as opposed to just hopping on your stories and saying something that maybe is not accurate or you might regret.
Yeah. Because I do. I feel bad for some of the stories like people are disclosing, trauma and abuse and they're joining around that like in the pods or on a date. And then it's like and people then attach themselves like, "Oh, isn't that person great?" I'm like, "Think through this. Like we appreciate the vulnerability, but now as a couple, what would that really mean they're working on? Like what now you get off the show, the cameras are off. Like what do you now it's when the relationship really starts."
And it's tough because for all of these dating shows, the point is to be as authentic and vulnerable as possible, to get to know someone, to connect, to build a life with them. But the pacing is off. That's not how humans typically pace that kind of attachment. So it's too much, too fast. And I think a lot of couples will need to pull back after the show is done to establish a foundation that they didn't have a chance to create in the first place. But to your point, if you disclose all of your trauma and your biggest fears and insecurities on date 3, you've exposed a lot, and you don't have this foundation of security and trust from which to build off of. So I think people have to be aware that you're supposed to be authentic, you're supposed to be vulnerable, but you do not have to say everything within 4 weeks of knowing somebody. It may not be the best.
100%. It's like a plant that you've just flooded with too much water. You don't have the roots yet, right? You don't have that established. But here's what I think would be fascinating. Another thinking about how therapy could be helpful, right? I personally think that if you don't have a therapist on the show, or even if you do, they should have access to them. And then after the show, it's really where now you've got this new couple that barely know each other. Like, how could you facilitate this getting to know one another, knowing what normal couples go through, et cetera, et cetera, if they had ongoing couples therapy for like a year? Because if the show wants to produce couples, Love is Blind, we're looking for like success rates, right? The
Mhm.
Bachelor, you got to have support. It almost feels like production is against them. And I'm like, we need to be supporting this couple. They made their choice. I may have chosen differently for them, but I need to get behind this couple.
Absolutely agree. And the premise of these dating shows is to find a life partner and to be happy. And they do a lot of things that seem to get in the way of people being able to do that. So absolutely give them a therapist, let them have private therapy that's not film, that's not part of a show, and see if they can make it work, because that would be really interesting to see.
What's fascinating, I don't know if you know, do you realize that on Survivor, they have therapists for everyone when they get off the show?
I have heard that, and I've heard that competition shows where money is involved are much better regulated than a lot of the dating shows.
I love this. It's like it's out there already. I'm like, if on Survivor you get a therapist to help you, why isn't this just like standard?
No, it should be, especially because people care about mental health and care about therapy. Everybody would be supportive of it.
100%. I know I
Can I
would.
add something to your list, though?
Yes, please.
I think people should expect or prepare to be disappointed that they might not be a main cast member, that they might be cut entirely from the show, or that they may not find love, or they may not win, whatever it is. You can't go in assuming, expecting that you're going to be the star and you're going to get everything out of it. And that will help you not feel too disappointed if it doesn't go your way.
Isabel, this is fantastic because I say like the odds are, right? Like I did like the odds of meeting somebody at a dating app versus like meeting them on a reality show is like 0.00001% or something. It's like super low, right? Even on the Golden Bachelor, 30,000 people signed up for the show and only one person was going to get married, like even get engaged. 30. So your chances are low, right?
Yes.
Manage your expectations because I think, be pleasantly surprised if it does happen. Your story may not get, you never know, again, how you're going to be edited. But I think check with yourself. And I
Mhm.
think if you also think about it from the positive perspective, is that I get to look in the camera and say, hey, you know what? If you live in California, I'm single, right? Like I could double down on my own marketing, right? Like make
Yes.
use for me. If I look like I'm a positive person who's kind of got it together, like you saw that, wouldn't that help my own dating?
Yes, and I love that because that is back to going on these shows for the right reasons. And really what we're saying is go on for your reasons. Don't go on with set expectations, but go on hoping for self-growth, for a unique experience, hoping to meet some interesting people, to right, like get a wider audience for dating, whatever it is, make sure you have things that you can control that you're going to get out of it, and then it will be a better experience.
And let me end with this. I also think the smart people who go on reality dating shows, they do figure out post-production, back to your point, like what was your reason? Like I've seen people, so let's say I'm on Instagram and now all of a sudden, am I going to just keep posting thirst trap pictures of me in like a bikini or a dress or something? Like, do I also want to advocate for mental health or yoga or cooking or design? But like those people who monetize,
Mhm.
whether it's a book or a wine label like Caitlin Burstall, like they had perhaps some idea of what that is. And if
Mhm.
you're going to make the most of it, then people are going to have to connect with you around some kind of story. Maybe it was I don't know if it was a weight loss journey, or because I can think of some people who have then taken something that was already, or music or anything, right? That they're going to then pivot into their audience.
Yes. Oh, what a good point. This is really a job. This is something that you should be thinking of as a job that you hope to monetize, or you hope it to become a niche of some sort. You cannot go into these shows doe-eyed, hoping to find love and nothing else, because you'll be disappointed and you won't maximize whatever potential benefits you get from it otherwise.
Thank you so much, Dr. Isabelle.